Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. It is the Championship Catch-Up Show. We're going to be looking back at all the weekends, All-Ireland Senior Football Championship action. 6 games to discuss, 6 games to break down, 2 in Ulster, 4 in Leinster. And yeah, look, I suppose all in all, the weekend went, I would say, very much how everyone expected it to. I think a lot of the games that people predicted happened. Some games were probably a little bit closer maybe than people thought. I mean, Dublin Wicklow was a lot closer. Even Antrim Armagh had shades of maybe at different stages thinking, oh, is there an upset on the cards here? I think both of us predicted Offaly to beat Meath. I suppose the opposite did happen, but in crazy circumstances.
I said Meath.
You said Meath. It was Matthew. We need to get
I
him on here.
I was definitely not confident of that prediction at half time.
yeah. Crazy. I mean, Meath scoring 120 in the second half. I mean, that's absolutely wild, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely crazy, and I mean, we'll jump into it, but yeah, looking forward to it, man. Glad to be back on. Yeah, some games went exactly the way that we thought that they would. Tyrone probably had it a little bit more comfortable against Cavan than I thought that they would as well. The win definitely played a big part in it. The first half, the win was very much in Tyrone's favour, and then it kind of died down in the second half, but they were really, really impressive. And like, we'll get into the performances of like players like Kieran McGeary, Darren McCurry, etc. And yeah, Dublin Wicklow was good. Wicklow died with their boots on, and that's certainly a positive to take for them into the Tailteann Cup for the rest of the season. And Dublin and Meath now, we'll get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. In Portlaoise as well. Hugely excited to go to it as well. I was supposed to be going to the Wicklow Dublin game. Unfortunately, for personal reasons, I couldn't go in the end. But no, I'm hugely excited. Hugely looking forward to going for Portlaoise outside Croke Park as well. So that's going to be an absolute cracker. But look, we'll start with what I think anyway was the game of the weekend, and it was Kildare 217, Westmeath 21 points. It was one of 2 games that was one of 3 games, I suppose, with Antrim Armagh as well. Yeah, absolute cracker game. It was on GA Plus. I was having all sorts of issues with GA Plus in this game. But I thought I did get to see the last 20 minutes, and I did go back and watch the rest of it. And look, to be fair, an absolute cracker of a game. Both teams going full throttle, and just a vintage championship game. And fair play to Kildare. Like, there was times in the game where it looked like Westmeath had the jump on them. But a big turnaround and a big win in the end for the Lily Whites.
Certainly, and they needed this win. There's no doubt about it. Because this now tees them up to have a real crack at Laois in the semi-final. If they win that game, they're into the Sam Maguire, which would be an incredible achievement for Kildare and for Brian Flanagan in his first year at the helm. There's no doubt that they have the footballers. We've talked about Kildare a lot because I've always really liked them. I love the McGeaney team, and I'd love to see Kildare return to the top table where I think they belong. And I really do believe that they have a crop of footballers there that if they mature to their maximum ability, they could be a problem for anybody. I really believe that. The likes of Callum Bolton, the likes of Jimmy Hyland, Derek Kirwan, Alex Byrne, Kevin Feely, like when they're on their day, James McGrath, 6, they're superb footballers. And Westmeath are known to always give as good as they get. It doesn't matter who Westmeath go up against, they always take a good swing at whoever. Whether it's, in the championship group stages over the last couple of seasons where they've taken teams to the pin of their collars, whether it's, in Division 2 this season where, look, even though they did get relegated, they took a swing at everybody in that division and they drew a Roscommon on the final day and nearly in the process cost Roscommon their promotion out of Division 2. They're always a sticky opponent. So it was a really good litmus test to see where Kildare are at. And given that it's Brian Flanagan's first year at the helm, some decent number of players in there who are relatively new under Brian Flanagan, the fact that they've got promotion out of Division 3 and now stand just 1 win away from a Leinster final and then an appearance in the Sam Maguire, they have to be delighted with where they're at. And in this game, as you said, a lot of questions were asked of them. There were a lot of times where they could have kind of panicked and let it get to their heads. But, David Hyland's goal, how many times have we seen that? A shot for a point drop short and then someone gets a palm to it and ends up in the back of the net. And those are the breaks that went Kildare's way. For Westmeath, it's been unlucky because the breaks have tended to go against them more or less in every game that they've had this season. they would have been worthy winners in this game, in my opinion. It was such an even contest. Luke Loughlin, obviously, we have to mention him, outstanding at full forward, 11 points. And then, according to Scorebio, we did the the High Rocks the next day. So he's an absolute tank, Luke Loughlin. And he's a superb footballer as well. And he's really taken up the mantle this season with the absence of John Heslin and Ronan O'Toole, etc. And yeah, Westmeath gave as good as they got, but Kildare just shaded it. I called this one right as well, so I've had a decent weekend in Leinster Championship predictions. I got all 4 correct. I will flex that because I expect that I won't get many weekends fully correct in the future. But I backed Kildare because I do feel like they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. No, I backed Westmeath going into it, to be fair, just mainly because I thought, given Kildare's record against the likes of Clare and Offaly this year. But no, in fairness, they're absolutely brilliant. And as you said, Alex Byrne was outstanding, 1-5 in total from him. Still think they can get better from some of their forwards as well. Like Derek Kirwan only kicked a point, missed a couple of opportunities. Ryan Sinky is still a young player as well. So like he's heaps of levels to improve on. So there is ways that Kildare can improve and get better as well, which I think is a good thing if you're a Kildare fan. And as well as that, like, it was mad, and I think I've seen on Twitter, I can't remember from who, but the only time they went long, the only time they actually kicked inside, they actually ended up with the goal, which was quite bizarre in itself. But yeah, big win for Kildare. Like for Westmeath, it's unfortunate as well. Like you feel like you've seen this for Westmeath so much, where they come so close, they put in a great effort. At the end of the game, everyone's saying Westmeath they've did themselves proud and everything else, but they haven't won. And it is like, it's unlucky. Look, they are playing against good teams, good high quality sides, but it's just another one of them games. As you said, like Luke Loughlin was outstanding, but it's another game that they'll look back at with just a bit of like, if they had a little bit more. I do wonder if they had a Ronan O'Toole, if they had a John Heslin that they've had in previous years, maybe that would propel them to get over the line.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it definitely is worth investigating and looking at the performances and everything like this. I think that's been the question over the last few years as well, that like, games that they've been, gone down to the wire and Kieran Martin's been injured or something like that. And God, if Kieran Martin was there, would they have got over the line that day? John Heslin and Ronan O'Toole would have vastly improved their forward line. There's no question about it. And I would extend that not just to this game, but to the league as well. Would they have won certain games that they lost? Would they have won certain games that they drew? Would they be staying in Division 2 next season? Because most of the games that they lost were by the thinnest of margins. And like, they lost the Meath game with seconds to go. They lost at the death, like literally the Hooter goal. They were so close in all the games that they played. Heslin and Ronan O'Toole would have improved the side, but then would we have seen the superb performances that we've seen from other players who stepped up to the plate? You just, as I said, as we always say, GA math never adds up, never adds up correctly. I think they would have had obviously a better chance of survival with Heslin and Ronan O'Toole, but I still think that they would have been fighting it out kind of at the wrong end of the table. But I think that they would have had a much better chance of survival. But Kildare winning this game against a Westmeath team who are so solid in Division 2, even though they got relegated, that shows me that Kildare are capable of competing at Division 2 next season. They're capable of picking up some wins. And if they're already there, then by the time it gets to the league next season, I imagine that they will have taken significant steps forward. And right now, I'd back them to stay in Division 2 next season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think after a result and a performance like that, they definitely have improved since last year. I think there was question marks over that because of, the standard of opposition that they were playing against this year. But I definitely think they have improved in fairness. Brian says here, Sam McCartan going off injured was massive as they were on top at midfield. And Kevin Feely came into midfield from a Kildare perspective. Running through a few other comments here. Farney Fan TV says the best team in Ireland is back versus Donegal this weekend.
That'd be a cracker.
The Donegal hurlers, is it? Or it means the footballers.
Football, yeah.
Footballers. No, I know what he means. I'm only joking. Brian says tickets for Dublin Meath not on sale. I've been keeping an eye on the account all day. Game is set for Portlaoise on Sunday, 27th of April at 4 p.m. Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting day indeed. Kildare Louth is set for Tullamore at 2 p.m. as well. Kieran says here, seriously need to give the league finals room after they're finished. Don't know what it is, but the championship seems to go flying by in very few games. Televised this weekend, alarmingly low crowds. Also, yeah, look, and I know we kind of discussed that a little bit last week, so I don't want to kind of end up repeating ourselves and everything else. Like from what I've seen with the Wicklow Dublin game, as I said, it wasn't at it, but it did look packed to the brim, to be fair, and it was very hard to get a ticket and everything else. And from looking at other games, like the Tyrone game seemed to have a low crowd and everything else. I suppose it's just that, like, there needs to be a proper launch, doesn't there, for the championship? I know they kind of do have their launch and everything else, but you have players who don't do interviews and it doesn't get broadcasted. Like, there should be a proper, like, I don't know, like championship day or something like that really gets everyone sort of enticed into it, kind of like a festival or something. Just something. I don't even know how you would do it, but something of that nature. Because it like a lot of these games are going by very thick and fast, and obviously a lot of these games probably are predictable. Maybe that has a bit of a feeling as to why people aren't that interested, but does seem to be a bit of like a launch or something. I think would do the GAA community and world, if that makes sense, a great deal of it would be very beneficial, I think.
Well, certainly, like, it's genuinely, like, because even as a content creator myself, I found myself almost caught between a rock and a hard place of, like, right, I want to make videos that talk about the league finals that we've just had, but I also want to make videos now previewing the championship, because the championship is starting this weekend. And it just didn't get enough time. It doesn't get enough time right now to kind of organically, the anticipation to organically grow. You kind of, it's happening before you even get a chance to fully realize, what's going on. And the bizarre thing is, like, the provincial finals are not far away at all. Like, in the league finals only just happened. Like, it's bizarre to think about how quick it goes by now. And the reality is I personally think the championship should be pushed back a couple of weeks, and the league should be also pushed back the other way a couple of weeks, and maybe have an inter period between the league and the championship where you let the under-20s and the minors take centre stage while the seniors are preparing for the championship. That the GAA hardcores who want to see GAA every day of the week, like myself, like yourself, can watch the under-20s in that period, and that we also know she's only 2 weeks to go now till the senior championship kicks off.
Yeah.
And then we can dive in there, because it's all so stacked on top of each other. I don't know if you noticed this, but the Leinster Championship did their official launch, and there wasn't a Dublin player in the photo because the
Yeah.
Dublin team was all away. So the team that has won the title for the last 14 years didn't have a player represented at the launch. Like, it was just it looks bad. That,
Yeah.
like, I'll put it this way. Oh, there's a mad stat. I don't know if I should say it, but everybody in that photo, like, nobody who's currently playing for any of those counties has a Leinster title. Like, that's
Yeah.
how tough the Leinster Championship has become to sell, because Dublin have had such dominance. So when we get into the Meath Dublin game, it's going to be so important for Meath to make us believe that they can beat Dublin either this year or in the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, it is, and I did hear that as well, to be fair, and I think the Dublin lads were away in Portugal or something of that nature, and maybe that had a bit of
Which
a part.
again is nobody's fault. It's nobody's fault, but I would agree with you. We should have, like, a day that's like kickoff day, like a launch day. That is a massive press conference event at Croke Park where there's representatives from, all different counties. And then, and like, even going further than that, you could sell tickets to that. Like, you really could.
Yeah.
Imagine if you were to host it in Croke Park and you were to have, like, almost like a family fun day type thing where, at the end of the press conference, the players are on the pitch, and, you can buy tickets to, like, go onto the pitch and have a kick around with some of the players, ask them questions before the championship, etc., etc. Like, imagine how cool that would be. Imagine how
Yeah.
much anticipation that would build for the championship. And that's me just spitballing up the top of my head because I didn't know we were going to go down this route. But there's a lot of ways that we can we can build this up. And I definitely think the current way of having a week before the league and championship, like, it's damaging for the league final as well as an attendance, because fans don't really buy the teams are going to give it everything that they got, as we've seen with 21,000 at this year's league final versus 45,000 for the league final of the same pairing only in 2019. But 2019, it was the 5th of May when the championship kicked off and the league finals took place on the same date. So why was it so feasible to do? Why was it so possible to do in 2019, but yet seems impossible to do only 6 years later? I do get that the club championship needs to be given its own space, but, you know, speaking as someone who, you know, covered the club championship in depth, the club championship was so spread out that surely we can figure out a better system to get that more neat and tidy.
Yeah. No, I absolutely, I completely agree with everything you've said there. And yeah, like, I think even a launch in a different stadium every year as well. It wouldn't necessarily
That
have
would
to
be
be
so
going
cool.
to a Crow Park. You know, you could do it in a different county every year, and what a chance for exposure and everything else that could be.
You
But
could do a Leinster launch in O'Connor Park, Munster launch in Porky Queeve, you know, Connacht launch in Pearse Stadium or McHale Park or the Hyde. Or you could do the launch where the final is going to be played that year. So the Ulster Championship launch will take place in St. Enoch's Park, because that's where the Ulster final will be played and everything like that. Like, how cool would that be?
Yeah. No, 100%. Completely agree. And Farney Fan TV says, talk about budgets. Dublin away in Portugal, whereas our lads went to Sligo. Yeah, like, it's, you know, and there's probably a lot of counties that don't get to go anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Unfortunately, the GA are simply trying to kill off the provincials. Yeah, it's. Look, we'll have a proper discussion about this, maybe, you know, kind of further down the line. But
I
like,
wouldn't
at
I
FB,
wouldn't I
they
wouldn't
need
agree
to.
that they're trying to kill off the provincials. I wouldn't agree at all with that. But I do think that we could do more to promote them. I do think sometimes with the provinces, because a lot of people talk about, you know, they sing the praises of Ulster and they sing the praises of Munster hurling, etc. And I am one of those people who does it. But your competition is only as good as the competitiveness between the teams. The thing that makes the Munster Hurling Championship so brilliant is you're not really sure who's going to win it. The thing that makes the Ulster Football Championship so brilliant is that you're not really sure who's going to win it. The Leinster Football Championship, we've known for the last decade before a ball is kicked who's going to win it. And what
Yeah.
that leads to is, again, you wouldn't buy tickets to go see a movie that you've already seen. We know how the story goes. We know how the plot goes. We know that Dublin will find a way to win the Leinster Championship. And that leads to attendances going down. If you go back to the mid 2000s, 2005, Dublin played Laois, 2006, Dublin played Offaly, 2007, Dublin played Laois, in 2008, Dublin played Wexford. All of those games in Croke Park were sellouts. I think the Wexford one had 81,000, so it was just under a sellout. But there was massive anticipation for those games because there was a real sense that it was a 50-50 game. And the Leinster Championship in the early 2000s and late 90s, multiple teams won it. Westmeath won it in 04, Laois won it in 03, Dublin won it in 02, Kildare won it in 2000, Meath won it in 2001, Offaly won it in 98. Offaly won it in 97 and Kildare won it in 98. But the point is that the cup was changing hands more or less every other year. So the Leinster Championship was a serious competition. And it's fallen away from that. And because the competitiveness has gone down, the interest has gone down. So what we need, what the provincial championships need, is we need somebody to really, really put it up to Dublin in the Leinster Championship. And we need somebody to really put it up to Kerry in the Munster Championship. And if that happens, the attendances would get better, the interest would get better, because promotion can only get you so far. You can do all the marketing in the world, you can do all the promotion in the world, you can do all the interviews in the world. If the fans have a fairly decent idea how the game's going to go, there is a ceiling to how far you can push it. The Munster Championship is limitless because the potential outcomes seem limitless. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah. Well, it's like, you know, it's like going into the cinema to see a movie that you know the ending of. Do you know what I mean? That's literally what it is. You know, so it's, Yeah. But look, we'll kind of, I suppose, transition very quickly from, you mentioned Meath, and obviously they beat Offaly 125 to 21 points. They scored 120 in the second half, as we were kind of alluding to a little bit earlier. I think it was 15 points to 5 at halftime. Offaly were by far dominant. I think a lot of the worries that Meath fans and even a lot of neutrals like myself were pointing towards some of the kind of backroom noise and turmoil maybe potentially within me that sort of happened recently, was all looking like it was coming to fruition in that first half. And Offaly's brilliant football and everything that had gone so well for Offaly was outstanding. But by God, did Meath turn it on in the second half. I mean, a dominant performance, 120 in total. And I'll put this to you, the fact they're playing Dublin in Portlaoise, which is not in Croke Park, and without talking too much about Dublin now, they weren't great against Wicklow. They definitely weren't. It wasn't their best performance. Now, is that a case of Dublin maybe holding themselves back a little bit? It probably is that case, but could Meath have a chance, do you think, against the Dubs in 2 weeks' time?
Well, what we seen in this game was a perfect, yes or no, in both the first half and second half. If Meath play like they played in the first half of this game, they will get battered against Dublin. If they play like they played in the second half of this game against Dublin, I think they can beat Dublin. I really, really do believe, because there's one huge difference that Meath have this year compared to last year, without trying to throw shade, but it will come across that way. Robbie Brennan is different at the wheel for Meath. I'm telling you now, when Meath went to Dublin last year for the Leinster Championship, you tell me if you disagree with me on this, but I doubt that you will. Meath gave the impression that day, the way that they lined out and the post-match press conference that O'Rourke did, it really gave the impression like they just showed up to get an ass whooping and go home. Like there was no hint, there was no whisper, there was never a stage of the game where Meath thought or looked like they believed that they could win. And that was pretty depressing, seeing how epic the Dublin Meath games used to be in the 90s and the 2000s, and that it was such a walkover in 2024. Whereas this time they've got Robbie Brennan at the helm, who is a winner. Like, as a manager, he's taken Kilmacud Crokes to the All-Ireland Club Championship and achieved a level of dominance over the Dublin Football Championship that is comparable with the great Vincent's teams, etc. Robbie Brennan will not accept an attitude in the Meath team that they're just going to roll over for Dublin. He will not accept that. And they have Dublin in a provincial ground where the atmosphere can become a lot more intense. Meath can make it tough for Dublin. And I really believe that since the last time Dublin lost in Leinster, which was to Meath in 2010, I think this is as dangerous a game as I've seen for Dublin in the Leinster Championship. You can make the argument about Kildare, of course, in 2022, playing against Dublin the year in the same year that they beat us in the league. But that game was in Croke Park. And as we know, if it's in Croke Park, Dublin have a massive advantage with that. So the fact that it's in a provincial ground, the fact that Meath are pretty used to playing there as well, it's going to give them a lot of confidence that they can get the job done. And I wouldn't be 100% sure that Dublin are going to win. I'd be 90% sure that we'll win. But the point is, the gap is closing. The gap is closing, which, as I was making my point there in my little rant where I went off topic, is good for the Leinster Championship.
Yeah. Liam says here, I do think this will be a good lesson for us heading into Tailteann. Also agree with everything said there about promoting the provincial championships, and even the fact that they didn't show any Leinster football games Sunday anywhere spoke volumes too. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like GA Plus, I know they probably only have a certain amount of games that they can show and everything else, but yeah, like a Meath Offaly there, showing that game would have been, I think a lot of people would have definitely tuned into that, and including me. But Farney Fan TV says Offaly fell off a cliff edge. I wonder what happens that caused them to switch off and let Meath take control. From looking at the highlights, like they obviously got an absolute bollocking at half time, to be honest with you, because they came out a completely different team. Connor Duke was very good. Matthew Costello, I think, deserves a massive shout out as well. 7 points from play, 9 of which in total. And they were by far superior. And Offaly probably, from what I saw anyway, from looking at highlights and everything else, I think they just didn't expect it. I think they got, they were very, very comfortable. And
well, again, that brings you back to what the difference is.
Yeah.
That brings us back to what the difference is. Like, do you remember 2 years ago when Meath played Offaly in the Leinster Championship, and Offaly were like 11 points to 2 up against them at half time, and Offaly saw it out without too much hassle? Like, O'Rourke was at the helm there. I feel like wouldn't have give them as much of a bollocking at half time. There's no doubt. I'd say Robbie Brennan was throwing shit at the wall, like just being like, that is completely unacceptable for any Meath team, and especially in Port Talton, and the way they came out in that second half and bossed the game, like, and roared back into it, and like they came out the right side of the result. To say when they were losing by 10 at halftime that they were going to win the game by 7, incredible turnaround. And that's why I really, really believe that they're actually in a decent enough position. I expect Dublin to win. I can't emphasize that enough. I expect Dublin to win because, again, as Matthew was saying, we have seen this before. We've seen examples with Meath where they looked like they were on the up. Like 2020 is a good example where they destroyed teams in Leinster, but then Dublin destroyed them in the final. But I was making the point that was a better Dublin team that had Fenton, McCarthy, Fitzsimons, Dean Rock. None of them are around anymore. It's a new Dublin team. It's a lot less experienced than it was, but it still, in my opinion, has enough to get the job done. But I think when you look at the trajectory, I think Meath probably do beat Dublin before the decade's out. It's just what year will it happen? I don't think it happens this year, but I wouldn't completely I wouldn't put my life on it. Last year, I would have put my life on Dublin to beat Meath. I wouldn't this year, and that says a lot about the progress that they've made and how impressed I am with them.
Yeah, and then there's multiple factors to it. It's Dublin have regressed. There's no doubt about that.
When you lose generational players, like,
yeah, I mean, it was only natural. It was going to happen one day, to be fair. Now, obviously, there are other players coming in, and there was a few young lads for Dublin who I thought, were impressive enough on Sunday, in fairness. But generally speaking, they definitely have regressed, and Meath have dramatically improved. You factor in, obviously, without being in Croke Park as well, that definitely does make a difference as well. But speaking of Dublin, look, they did come through Wicklow in the end, 221 to 18 points. Only a 9-point victory in the end. And, speaking to yourself and Matthew in the preview show, we were saying this could be 20 plus. There were some shouts in the comments even for 30 plus potentially as well, which you understand. Wicklow didn't even get out of Division 4. Dublin are Dublin, do you know what I mean? And they usually win these games at an absolute canter. Obviously, maybe playing outside Croke Park, playing in Antrim, maybe coming back from heavy training and everything else in Portugal probably played a difference to it. But there absolutely was a flatness about Dublin's performance. It felt like in moments where it looked like they were going to kick on and win the game at an absolute canter, they would allow Wicklow back into it. And it reminded me a lot, and I'm not too sure if you'd agree with this, but the Wexford performance from a couple of years ago in the Leinster Championship, and I actually think Dublin were probably better on Sunday than they were that day. But there was that element of just not brushing Wicklow to the absolute side, which we've seen Dublin do on countless occasions before. And maybe it is a sign that they are slowing down a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, look, this game was always going to be interesting to see kind of how fresh and how on it Dublin would be. Not at 100%. It reminded me a lot as well of, do you remember the Dublin Carlow game in 2017? When Carlow just wouldn't really just go away. Like, Dublin, like that. Look, there was never a sense that Dublin were going to lose this game. There was never a sense that Dublin were going to lose the Carlow game. But both of them, Carlow and Wicklow respectively, just never went away. Always, if Dublin got 2 points, Wicklow and Carlow would respond with 1, and they just kind of kept not that far away. And I know it's a 9-point victory for Dublin, but you have to factor that in with the new rules. What we've seen is, with these new rules, you can get a real beatdown with these new rules. And it didn't quite happen. Interestingly enough, another new goalkeeper for Dublin, like Hugh O'Sullivan in nets.
Yeah.
So we've seen Gavin Sheridan, we've seen Evan Comerford, we've seen Stephen Cluxton, and now we've seen Hugh O'Sullivan. It's interesting to know we haven't even seen like David O'Hanlon. Like there's so many
Yeah.
different options. Mick Shield as well is one that we've used over the last few years. It's so interesting to see kind of what exactly is Desi's number one choice there in nets. It probably still is Stephen, but very, very difficult to tell. And look, I didn't see this game live because we couldn't, but I was keeping up with it on Scorebio and I was keeping up with it on the live Twitter updates. And again, it gave me the
Mm.
vibe of the Carlow game in that it was never one that I thought Dublin were going to lose. But Wicklow still,
Mm.
as I said, died with their boots on, went down swinging, and they can hold their heads high as they head into the Tailteann Cup.
Yeah, yeah. Like I listened to it on the radio. To be fair, it was on 98 FM. So fair play to them for covering the game. But yeah, like it was like fair play to Wicklow as well. Like you have to give them a huge amount of credit, like for their performance and how well they played and how well they fought. In fairness, and like for Dublin, like there were some positives. Obviously, Con O'Callaghan finishing with 1-7. His first game as Dublin captain as well. Missed the penalty, but did score the rebound. In fairness, so that was a big win from a Dublin perspective, or a big goal from a Dublin perspective at the time. But like you have to commend Wicklow as well. Like Kevin Quinn, Ushie McGrain are both very, very impressive performers from them. And look, Wicklow will take a lot of confidence because, like it's often been said before, when teams get a massive hammering at the hands of Dublin, we've probably seen it with Meath and even Offaly last year, that the confidence is just on the floor going into the Tailteann Cup. Don't think this will be the same for Wicklow, and I think they'll actually take a lot of confidence now going into the Tailteann.
Yeah, no, I would agree because they've gone toe to toe with one of the best teams in the country, a team that was solid in Division 1 this season, a team that I think a lot of people will put in the mix for the All Ireland. They definitely aren't the front runners that they were over the last 10 years, but definitely still one that you can't write off. And the Wicklow went toe to toe with them, never stood down, never, shied away from the challenge. And going into the Tailteann Cup, you can't buy that. You can't buy that confidence in what you're working towards. And for the Wicklow boys, like players like Dean Healy, Podge O'Toole, Kevin Quinn, they all stood up. Mark Jackson was outstanding in goal again. I think Mark Jackson is slept on. I think he's genuinely one of the best goalkeepers in the country. Like his kickouts are fantastic. His long range free taking is unbelievable. And he was quietly, given that NFL chance alongside Began. But like when you see Mark Jackson play, it's no surprise that he also was put on that ticket because he's an amazing keeper. And yeah, I think if I was, transferring in a player, I'd make a cheeky bid for Mark Jackson as well. Yeah, look, unbelievable performance by Wicklow. They hold their heads high. They go into the Tailteann, and I wouldn't write them off of taking a scalp in the Tailteann, like taking down a bigger team. I don't think that they'll be one of the front runners to win it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they really make life difficult for like a team like a Westmeath that you would expect to be one of the front runners to win it.
Absolutely, yeah. Dublin is great. Says here, I was very disappointed with our performance, but we can use this as inspiration for the Meath game. Like I suppose that is the thing. We have seen this with Dublin under Desi before, and there probably are some similarities with Dublin so far this year with 2023. And obviously Dublin went on to win the All Ireland that year. The big difference is though that Dublin don't have the lads. They don't have. They don't have McCarthy. They don't have. I mean, Paul Mannion doesn't seem to be knocking about.
No.
It doesn't look like we're going to see any of him, unfortunately, or Jack McCaffrey or any of these lads. So, there's a lot of big players and big names missing. Unfortunately, Liam does say here, what are your thoughts on Con becoming captain? Yeah, I think, look, it was either going to be him or Kieran Kilkenny, in my opinion. It was going to be one or them two. I know there were some shouts for Mick Fitz, but realistically, probably only his last year. So look, I think it was going to be either Con, Kieran Kilkenny, maybe a Niall Scully, but I think look, Con's a good show. In fairness, he has been Dublin's best player probably over the last couple of years in terms of consistency. So yeah, I think it was either him or Kilkenny, and I think to be fair, Con's earned it. What do you think?
I agree, because I think you can extend the same thing to Kilkenny, that like I wouldn't be flabbergasted if Kilkenny steps away in the next 2 years. So I think
Yeah.
Desi's probably looking at Con and thinking you're not going anywhere for a while. You'll be around for at least 5 or 6 years, and that can help spearhead, and you can be the leader for this next generation of players coming through into the Dublin team. Like Conor Tyrrell made his championship debut there for Dublin. He is again one of the new breed into the team. The Lorcan O'Dells, the Greg McEnaney's, the Peadar O'Coffey Burns, the young lads that have come in. And O'Coffey Burns, to call him a young lad sounds a bit mad, because it feels like he's been around forever, but he's still mid-20s, early 20s. Like, he's definitely not heading towards the end of his career yet. So Con will, carry a lot of that team, I believe, and he'll lead from the front. He's a very, very good pick as captain, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Brian says here as well, Leinster semi-final clashes are not being shown on TV. Munster hurling.
Well, I hope they are being shown somewhere.
I'd be very, surely GA Plus or something. I'd be very surprised if those games are. Could you imagine
if Dublin and Meath isn't shown, man? Come on.
Do you know what was mad? Because I was kind of like, when I was listening to the Wicklow Dublin game, it was like, how mad would it be the time that Dublin got beat in the Leinster Championship and no one got to see it?
That would be mental.
Yeah. Well, look, to be fair, like, probably nobody is going to see it for a few years, because it probably.
Could you imagine the controversy? Jesus.
Yeah. Well, look, another team that is still in the mix is Louth as well. They beat Laois 216 to 17 points. It always proposed to be a tricky game, to be fair, for Louth. They managed to come through it. Look, in fairness to Laois, like, they put in a big performance again, and I think they've done themselves proud and in the Leinster Championship this year, in terms of beating Wexford and obviously putting in a big show here. And even like all 6 of their starting forwards scored. Mark Barry with 8 points in there as well. So some big performance from Laois. But for Louth, even with the absence of Samuel Roy, they came through it and get the win.
Certainly, and then you're looking at other key players that didn't start. No Craig Lennon there. Kieran Byrne returned, got 1-3. Ryan Burns at 1-4 there, top of the left. Connor Grimes back in there, corner forward, played 62 minutes. Like, Louth looking good, Nick, especially the fact that they're without Samuel Roy. They're putting up 216 and they're getting a win against a very, very game Laois team who came to win. Like, there's no doubt about it. Justin McNulty does get a tune out of that Laois team. They were solid in Division 3. Yes, they finished 6th, but they never looked like they were going to get relegated, did they? And yeah, Laois were always going to make life difficult, and they got very impressive wins over Sligo, very impressive win over Leitrim. Like, all these things, like Laois moving along nicely, and there's always going to be a difficult test for Louth, but one that they're past with flying colours, and it just shows how much that their level has elevated. Because people didn't even think about it. People just were like, yeah, Louth are favourites for this one. And you go back 6 or 7 years, this game would have been 50-50, and you probably would have been shading it to Laois. So they've come a long way under Mickey Hart and under Ger Brennan, and the players that they have now, this is their new station. This is what's expected allowed to get to the Final Four of Leinster at the very least, and to probably make it to a Leinster final. So they'll embrace that. They have Kildare next. That's a real 50-50 game. I really think either of them could come out on top. Some of the form that the Louth lads are in, especially Ryan Burns, Kieran Downey, they're going to be the problem makers. But I think matching up against Kildare, I think that's going to be fascinating. I think that's going to be a belter of a game.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and it'd be hard to call that. Like, even now, like, I mean, you probably, like, I probably would give the edge to Louth just because they've been in these games more. They've beaten Kildare last year. But what you would say is that Kildare have gotten better. Have Louth gotten better? I'm not sure. So, like, and obviously we don't know the status with Samuel Roy, with Craig Lennon as well. Like, if those players are going to be available, if they're missing them,
I think if those 2 lads are
Kildare,
still out,
Kildare could do it.
Yeah, I think you said it there. I think if those 2 lads are still out, Craig Lennon did come on. He came on in the 52nd minute and scored a point. So for me, he has to start. Tommy Dernan also came off the bench, got a point. For me, he has to start as well, because Kildare are super strong around the middle. Like Kevin Feely, Callum Bolton, like Aaron Masterson. Like, they're ridiculously strong around the middle. So you need to go with your best hand there around the midfield. And there's no doubt Tommy Dernan is in with that category. He needs to start. Craig Lennon needs to start. And if Samuel Roy can play, he needs to play, because this game is going to be very, very 50-50.
Yeah.
Such a tough one to call. Do you know what? I kind of fancy Kildare. I
Yeah.
really do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to reserve my prediction until the
Yeah,
time comes.
like I'll do my official predictions closer to the day. Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But
But it's very hard to call. It could be extra time. To be fair, there really could be extra time with that one. Moving on to Ulster, Antrim 123, Armagh 134. In Corrigan Park, the game happened in Corrigan Park. Armagh came through it in the end via 11 points. Big result, obviously, for Armagh to get over the line and get the victory. For an Antrim perspective, though, like they gave this a good battle. Like they were leading at halftime, 14 points to 13. Gave this a fair old go. It must be said. Paddy McBride was very impressive. 9 points from him in total. And there was stages in the game like where it looked like maybe the shock was on, especially at one stage in the second half. You're kind of thinking, if Armagh don't raise their levels here, then Antrim could potentially do it, which would have to go down as probably one of the greatest Ulster Championship shocks of all time if it happened. But in fairness to Armagh, they did come good. They did step up in the second half and did enough to get the victory.
yeah, certainly. And you have to talk about the bench impact that Armagh had. Like just reading through it here, Aidan Falker came off the bench, got 1 point. Keane McConville came off the bench, got 2 points. Jamar Hall with 1 point, and Oisin O'Neill with 6. Like
Yeah.
Oisin O'Neill, outrageous. Um, they'd have the massive bench impact. And then at the start, you got Rory Grugan with 8 points. You got Callum O'Neill from midfield with 4 points. Ross McQuillan with number 5 on his back, but we all know he's not a wing back. 3 points from him. Yeah, really good performance by Armagh in tricky circumstances because the Corrigan Park are nowhere factor. That's a rocket boost for any team in terms of galvanizing the squad and the fans and getting them all singing from the same hymn sheet, pulling in the same direction. And if Armagh had a shown weakness, which we seen with Antrim, like they were game, they were ready for, they were ready to go out there and do everything they can to cause a shock. And it's the performances that they had of players, some of them like Paddy McBride, I thought was absolutely outstanding. Mark Jordan was solid as a rock there at centre back. Dominic McInhill with 4 points. Ryan McQuillan with 1-5 in the other corner, only 20 years of age. Like Antrim did do themselves proud again, similar to the Wicklow game, but going up against the All Ireland champions was always going to be a really difficult ask. But yeah, I think even though they lost this game, they can hold their heads high.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a similar scenario to Wicklow. Like they'll go into the Tailteann Cup with a little bit of positivity and thinking, and look, to be fair to Antrim, they've gotten to a couple of semi-finals in the last couple of years of that competition. So Andy McEntee has done a decent job there. Dublin's graces, Antrim were very good in the first half, but the way they were playing could not be maintained for 70. I mean, look, you knew Armagh's quality, especially with the bench. You knew as well that Armagh, a bit like Dublin against Wicklow, they weren't at full tilt. They weren't pushing it too hard because of, obviously, look, Armagh have now got to play Tyrone in an Ulster semi-final, and that's going to be a very intense game indeed. I think it must be said. And speaking of Tyrone, they did come through Cavan 124 to 20 points. Very comfortable in the end, it must be said, for Tyrone. Darren McCurry, very impressive performance from him. Obviously, Con Kilpatrick getting the goal as well in the second half. But it was very comfortable. Look, having moments in the second half where they looked like they were going to make a game over. And shout out to Darren McVitie, who played very well. But all in all, Tyrone, it must be said, never looked like losing this game.
Yeah, no, Tyrone looked superb, especially in the first half. They had the wind at their back. Some of the points that they were kicking over were sensational. Again, Kieran McGeary, you have to give a massive shout to him. The fella looks like he's back to his best. He played there in the half-back line, but, played more or less all over the pitch. And 3 points to his name. Michael McKernan, the other wing, who is playing some of the best football I've ever seen Michael McKernan play. And he got a point himself. Then in the forward line, Darren McCurry with 7, Rory Canavan with 4, albeit all from frees. Peter Hart with 1, Colin McShane with 2, Donaghy with 1, Kieran Daly with 1. All 6 of their starting forwards get on the score sheet. Same thing that we were talking about earlier with Armagh. Con Kilpatrick with a goal from midfield. Kennedy with a point. Like, it's really, really, really savage stuff. In fact, I'm just realising it there. Of their starting 15, only Rory Brennan and Aidan Clark did not get on the score sheet. Like
Yeah.
that's an incredible stat for Tyrone to have against a very, very good Cavan team. A Cavan
Mm.
team who didn't do themselves justice, I think, in terms of their performance, but a Cavan team that could very easily have gathered promotion out of Division Two, and has beaten teams of the caliber of Roscommon this season, and really, really put it up to Tyrone last year. I
Mm.
think this Tyrone team is better than the Tyrone team last year, and comprehensively better, because
Mm.
Dara Canavan did not play this game. And I think if Dara Canavan hadn't have played last year, it would have been a way heavier blow
Yeah.
than it is this year. And I'm not saying that in any sort of a disrespectful way to Dara or to his capabilities. I still think he's one of the best forwards in Ireland. And there's an argument for him to be the best. I really do believe that. But Tyrone are stacked. They have a lot of
Mm.
talented players. Darren McCurry, Rory Canavan, Colin McShane, Peter Hart. Like, that's a
Yeah.
great forward line, even without a player like him. And you got players like Matty Donnelly coming off the bench, Joe Goose coming off the bench, Owen McElhone, Shea O'Hare didn't even get on. Like, they are really, really stacked. It's just about, can Malachy O'Rourke mold this into the best possible Tyrone team that it can be. I think he's the right man for the job. They're moving in the right direction. Do not underestimate Tyrone.
Mm. Yeah, like in that Ulster semi-final against Armagh in a couple of weeks' time. I mean, that
Mate,
proposed that. Actually, I'm not too sure when it is. I think it might be 2 weeks' time, but like that proposes to be the best championship game of the year so far, the most intriguing, the most watched. To be fair, I think everybody will be tuning into that. Surely, like I mean, that's going to
oh,
be blood, thunder, whatever you can imagine. Do you know what I mean?
certainly, because on top of that, like talking to people up from Ulster, they said there's nothing better than when your rivals win the All Ireland, and then you get to have a crack at them in the Ulster Championship the next season. Armagh have won the
Mm.
All Ireland, and they're Billy strutting around with the Sam Maguire and their Celtic crosses. And Tyrone, I'd say they have been
Waiting in the
licking
long
their
grass.
lips,
Yeah.
waiting to have a go with them. And with these new rules, it's gonna be a barn burner of a game. And I won't dare even attempt to predict who I think is
Yeah.
going to win
Yeah.
that one right now. I'll do that as the week goes on, because if Dara Canavan is still out, if there's news that he doesn't play, then obviously that's a massive swing in the favour of Armagh. Because as I said, even though I was saying how stacked Tyrone are, Canavan still is the best. He's still the best
Yeah.
they've got. And maybe Armagh, maybe an injury happens to them, or they get someone back that's significant, everything like that. Like, there's a lot that can change in a few days. So I'm going to hold off on predicting it until that comes around. But God, I cannot wait for it, because you look at the heritage of Armagh, Tyrone, and the rivalry between those two counties, the epic Ulster finals that we seen in the 2000s, the epic clashes that we saw, and how both of them, made history at the start of the 21st century, capturing their first All Irelands just 1 year after each other. And the battles between Oisin McConville, Stephen O'Neill, Kieran McGeeney, and then Ronan Clark. And then on the Tyrone side, you've got Muggsy, Peter Canavan, Stephen O'Neill, Brian Dewar. If we can get some more of that, yes, please. So I think it's going to be
Mm.
an unbelievable game. And as I said, I'm going to hold off to the last minute before I dare predict it.
Yeah, yeah. No, like I think the thing is with the rivalry as well, because like when Tyrone won the All Ireland in 2021, Armagh weren't at that level yet. And then obviously Tyrone had a bit of a drop off after that. And that was, it was 2022 when I feel like Armagh kind of really started to kind of lay down a real kind of serious marker in terms of being an All Ireland contender. So we haven't seen both of them kind of at their best. And I feel like this is going to be the first time in this kind of period, although they've both won All Irelands in the last, 5 years or so, both weren't at their best at the same time. So I think that's what's going to make it even more fascinating. And just looking at it there, like it's on the 26th of April as well, which I hope is true, because the Dublin game is on the 27th, and I do not want to miss that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Hopefully we can have our cake and eat it, as they say.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, look, I think we'll wrap it up there. Cheers very much to Seamus for jumping on the podcast. Make sure to check out on Clitha when you get a chance. And Brian has confirmed for us here they are showing the Leinster semi-finals on GA Plus. So thank God for that. But there we are. So yeah, cheers anyone who tuned in. Hit the like button, subscribe if you could. We'll be back later in the week. We're going to drop an All-Ireland hurling predictions video, hopefully on Wednesday evening. So we'll be going live for that, and then we'll be previewing all the games on Thursday as well. So yeah, cheers anyone who tuned in, and we'll speak to y'all later.